All right. Well, hello. Thank you again for joining us for the Better Dad Show podcast. I'm your host, Bill Hutchison. The design for this podcast, the reason why I'm doing it is to work on becoming a better dad and a better husband and a better man. And so I just want to get as many men alongside so we can do this together and we can continue to grow. The first season of this podcast, we're reading through the book called Better Dads, Stronger Sons by Rick Johnson, this book here. And we have so far read the first 4 chapters of the book, as well as the introduction. So with the last time that we read it, they had some questions just at the end. So we'll start this one just by reviewing those questions and seeing where we go from there. So questions from last week were: what kind of physical activities do you participate with your son? Describe a tough time that you and your son have been through. How did it end up? If you have a stepson, how can you bond more closely with him? And also think about some ceremonies that you can initiate for your son and plan one or more and implement it at the proper time. So I've been thinking quite a bit about that, just what activities I've done with my sons. And, I used to do soccer with my youngest because I was a soccer coach for 5 seasons, but he doesn't have a team this year, so I'm not doing that. We were cycling at least once a week, and then I went and broke my hand. So because of that, I wasn't able to cycle, and I'm still doing physio on the hand to try to get it working properly. And once it is, I'm hoping to get going again with that. And then when it comes to, tough times, I don't have a stepson, and ceremonies. Ceremonies is something I've been thinking a lot about as well this week. Not only that, but also just sort of what kind of things can we do with our sons. And part of that too, I wanted to talk about at the end of this, and that is just to discuss so I'm just setting up monitoring properly. So at the end of this, I want to talk about kind of what skills should our sons have. So when we look at what activities we can do with our sons, I want us to kind of think that through and how can we do activities with them that will really benefit them as they move forward in life. So how can we equip them better? So if you have any ideas, drop them in the chat wherever you're joining us. So we are currently streaming on Twitch, DLive, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And you can drop it in a chat in any one of those. Kind of what kind of skills. If I see it there, I'll actually note it down. I have a notepad up with me this time, so we can work on that. So just let me know what skills, and we can talk about them after, and maybe even look at how we can do that and how we can maybe even here in Adelaide, or you at wherever location you're at, can put something together to bless our sons and to then equip them better moving forward with their lives. So we are going to start now with Better Dads, Stronger Sons, Chapter 5, called Mistakes All Dads Make. An expert is a man who has made all the mistakes which can be made in a very narrow field. Niels Bohr, quoted in Alan McKay's The Harvest of a Quiet Eye. This is a long chapter. We've got 25 pages to get through. So based upon, I think last week was about 20 pages, and it took me almost 40 minutes. So we're going to look at maybe 50 minutes this time. So let's go. Now, if the quotation above is true, I must be getting pretty close to being an expert father by now. I don't know about the other dads out there, but do you ever have weeks when mistakes all dad make really just stand out as being massive? Anyways, if the quotation above is true, I must be getting pretty close at being an expert father by now. As a matter of fact, the only reason you're holding this volume now is that I've made enough mistakes to fill up a book. Thankfully, though, I've learned from the mistakes I've made. The mark of a good leader and a good father is just that, the ability to learn from mistakes. The man who doesn't is doomed to repeat them over and over again. I've said many times, I wish I knew when my kids were little what I know now about fathering. Part of my being a more knowledgeable father just comes from having been a father for so long. Becoming an efficient leader takes time. We have to be seasoned. Our experience our experiences give us wisdom and humility, and the process takes time. Patience truly is a virtue. Yet even developing practices takes time and practice. No man is a perfect father. I'm certainly not. We all fall short somewhere. The key is to take our strengths and nurture them while throwing off our weaknesses and replacing them with positive traits. But this often takes time and a lot of hard work. Some weaknesses are designed into us by God. Some are conditioned into us by our upbringing. One of the toughest barriers I had to overcome as a father was the negative training I received as a boy. I had to forcibly train my mind to consciously reassess my reactions to people and difficult situations, replacing instinct with determined wisdom. It wasn't easy. God created man in his image and endowed man with the headship of his home. That gives men a special place in God's eyes as a leader of their families. And as such, we have the responsibility to train our sons to be leaders in their families as well. Understanding the way to succeed in some of the most common ways we blow it up will help you rise to that task. The following areas are mistakes I've made, or I've either made or seen other men make. I list these not because I'm perfect, not because I've perfected these areas, but because I finally recognize them for the problem spots they really are. Think about these areas and how you can train your son to avoid making these mistakes with his family. Mistake 1. Emphasizing weakness and not strength. As a father, I have a tendency to focus on the things my son does wrong instead of the things he does right. But as a coach, I tell my players to focus on their strengths, not their weaknesses. Help your son find his strengths, his gifts from God. Focus on those instead of being overly critical of his weaknesses. Talk to your son about his God-given strengths and weaknesses. All of us have been blessed with certain skills and find ourselves lacking in others. Find out where your son excels and help him to use and cultivate those strengths to succeed in life. When Frank was in elementary school, it became apparent that he probably would not become a star athlete. Not because he wasn't physically capable or coordinated enough. He played sports and did pretty well in all of them. But he did not seem to have the drive or competitive desire, the fire in the belly, to be really successful. Rather than force him to be a sports star, as was my initial inclination, I chose to focus on his strengths. Thankfully, I realized in time that I wanted him to focus on athletics because that was an area of strength for me, not for him. Frank is very intelligent. He loves music. I encouraged him to join the band and learn a musical instrument. I told him, when I was in high school, I used to look up into those stands, and those guys in the band always seem to be having such a good time. Plus, they get to hang around the cheerleaders, and they get excused from school to travel to all the games. Whenever we watched college basketball or football games on television, I was quick to point out the camera shots of the band members cheering on their team. Many dressed crazily with their faces painted. I also casually mentioned that the band members get into all the games for free. Band members at a college that is a national powerhouse get to attend championship football and basketball games that most people never will. Frank joined the band in 6th grade and has continued playing up into college. He has enjoyed himself immensely and has learned to play several instruments, a skill that will give him joy throughout his life. His positive experiences helped him to develop a healthy self-esteem. If I had pushed him into sports, he might have struggled with his self-image. Instead of setting him up for failure, I helped him to succeed. And yes, he got to hang out with the cheerleaders. We have a little aside here that's called Determining Your Son's Strengths and Weaknesses. 1. What things is he good at? What areas does he struggle in? 2. What does he enjoy or like to do? Is he passionate about anything in particular? 3. What is his temperament like? Calm, compliant, volatile? 4. What is his personality like? Is he introverted or extroverted? 5. What is his physical structure like? Realize, however, that your son can change drastically as he grows. My son went from a scrawny little runt to a huge giant of a young man. That explains my 21-year-old pretty well, actually. He's taller than me now, and he was short. I wouldn't say midget short, but he was short when he was growing up. What particular traits has God endowed your son with? Is he likable, compassionate, stubborn, or strong-willed? It's amazing how different characteristics like strong-willed can be good or bad, depending just on how the child chooses to use it. Mistake number 2, avoiding physical affection. As men are raised to be uncomfortable with too much affection from another male, especially the physical kind, it's interesting that we compensate for this by knocking each other all around the football field, wrestling mat, or boxing ring. For some reason, we think it's okay to slap another man in the butt during the heat of athletic competition, but we're uncomfortable hugging one another in greeting. As physical as the male animal is, you'd think we would be more comfortable expressing physical affection, but I think it must be a social taboo ingrained into our unconscious minds at an early age. Hug and kiss your son, give him plenty of physical love. Even as he gets older, continue to show him physical affection. And in case you missed it, yes, I said kiss him. Sometimes it's uncomfortable for us grizzled old-timers, but it pays big relational dividends. Not sure about this part. I started early when my son was a baby, showing him physical affection. It was easier at that time, just the kissing part. The hugging part is good. I'm not sure about the other part. It was easier at that time than it would have been later on. I made a decision when he was born that I would overcome my natural reluctancy and show him the physical affection I craved from my dad as a boy. That's a decision I have never regretted. I smile now when I think of the times my son, even after entering adolescence, slipped his hand into mine as we walked across the parking lot together. My initial reaction was always to flinch, but I fought the urge to reject his advance, forcing myself to hold his hand as we walked into the store. Sometimes we get funny looks from people, but who cares what other people think? He's my boy. Long after everyone else had moved on, your relationship with your son and his family will bring you joy and contentment. Even now that he's in college, Frank still comes up and kisses me on the forehead whenever he comes home or leaves the house. When we were having a rough time between us, I know that I can drape my arm across his shoulders or pat him on the back as a way of making amends and breaking the impasse in our disagreements. I still struggle with apologizing and asking forgiveness, but even if I can't verbalize or articulate my feelings to him, I know we can connect through a touch, all because we are comfortable in showing manly physical affection to one another. Mistake number 3, giving too little time. Now, don't forget, this book was actually written, I think it was almost 20 years ago. 2006. Yeah, so 18 years ago. So I feel like things have probably gotten even busier since then. But these phones, they're like horrible for relationship with the people around us because you can just get so wrapped up in them and take away the time. You see so many memes of that, the mom or dad sitting on their phone while their kids are playing, not interacting. Let's read this section. Giving too little time. The Encyclopedia Britannica devotes half a page to the accomplishments of Charles Francis Adams, the son of President John Quincy Adams. The younger Adams followed the political trail of his father and became a U.S. diplomat to Great Britain. The encyclopedia makes no mention of Charles's family, but Charles's diary does. One day's entry reads, "When fishing with my son today, a day wasted." Someone else's diary, however, offered a different perspective on that same event. "When fishing with my father, the most wonderful day of my life." The person who wrote those words was Charles's son, Brooke. Interesting, isn't it, how a little boy's perspective can be so different from his dad's? It's almost a cliche to quote the song by Harry Chapin, "Cats in the Cradle," to illustrate the consequences of a father being too absorbed in his work when his son is young. The reality is that most of us men are taught by our culture that in order to be a success at life, we must be successful in our work, that our career is more important than anything else in life. Now, we give lip service to the importance of our families, but our actions speak louder than our words. A mother and her young son were looking through an old family photo album when the boy noticed a snapshot of the handsome young man with dark, curly hair. "Who's that?" he asked. "That's your father," the mother replied proudly. "Oh yeah?" said the boy. "Then who's the bald guy who lives with us?" Ouch. Maybe that father's been spending too much time at work and not enough time with the family. One of the things I miss the most now that our children are older is having them run headlong to me yelling, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home," when I walk through the door from work. As I look back, I find that shuffling along with those little monkeys wrapped around each of my legs was an exquisite pleasure that I miss dearly. Their unbridled joy at seeing Dad was more precious than silver and gold in my heart. Unfortunately, at the time, I was more concerned with getting ahead, making my mark in the world, and providing for my family than I was with relishing those moments. Consequently, I often ran the kids off before they would fully express their joy at seeing me after a long day of absence. As an experienced older man, let me give you younger fathers a little advice. That season comes around once in a life, and it's fleeting. If I could do anything over again, I would do a better job of decompressing before I got home from work, so I could enjoy rolling around on the floor for a few minutes with the little rugrats. Now, with teenagers in the house, It seems as though no one cares when the old man comes home anymore. That is, unless they need money. A man can come home from work late again, tired and irritated, to find his 5-year-old son waiting for him at the door. Daddy, may I ask you a question? Yeah, sure, what is it? Replied the man. Daddy, how much money do you make an hour? That's none of your business. What makes you ask such a thing? The man asked angrily. I just want to know. Please tell me, how much do you make an hour? Pleaded the boy. You must know I make $20 an hour. Oh, the little boy replied, head bowed. Looking up, he said, Daddy, may I borrow $10, please? The father was furious. If the only reason you want to know how much money I make is so you can borrow some to buy a silly toy or some other nonsense, then you march yourself straight to your room and go to bed. Think about why you're being so selfish. I work long, hard hours every day and don't have time for such childish games. The little boy quietly went to his room and shut the door. The man sat down and started to get even madder about the little boy's questioning. How dare he ask such a question only to get some money? After an hour or so, the man had calmed down and started to think he might have been a little hard on his son. Maybe he really needed to buy something with that $10, and he really didn't ask for money very often. The man went to the door of the little boy's room and opened the door. Are you asleep, son? He asked. No, Daddy, I'm awake, replied the boy. I've been thinking maybe I was too hard on you earlier, said the man. It's been a long day, and I took out my aggression on you. Here's the $10 I was asking for. The little boy sat straight up, beaming. Oh, thank you, Daddy, he yelled. Then he reached under his pillow. He pulled out some more crumpled bills. The man, seeing the boy already had money, started to get angry again. Then the little boy slowly counted out his money, then looked up at the man. Why do you want more money if you already have some? The father grumbled. Because I didn't have enough, but now I do, the little boy replied. Daddy, I have $20 now. Can I buy an hour of your time? Your kids aren't impressed with all your accomplishments. The only thing that really impresses them is your time and attention. Not spending enough time with your kids creates anger in them. There's really no greater insult than being ignored. To realize that our kids love us, they want to respect us, and they want a relationship with us. And that they want a relationship with us is a wonderful thing. They just may be the only people in the world who want to love you, who want to respect you. With everyone else, you have to work for those things. When we come to our kids and apologize, they want to repair the relationship with us. But when we refuse to humble ourselves, when we break our promises, when we publicly embarrass them or compare them to, or abuse them or ignore them, then anger begins to sour their souls. Think about that for a minute. Just by the virtue of who you are, and for no other reason, your kids want to love you. What a gift from God. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor or what you've accomplished. Just because you're you, they want to love and respect you. Even kids whose dads are in prison or a terrible role model still want to love and respect their fathers. Only after years and years of disappointment do they lose that feeling. Actually, I don't think they ever lose it. They just guard their hearts to shield themselves from the pain. Your kids want to respect you, yet sometimes we thoughtlessly trample on that gift. I know I have. God gives us that gift, and the only way we ever lose it is by our own actions and words. Only we can take away the instinctual desire that God places in our kids' hearts. No one else can. No one else could talk it out of our kids or even beat it out of them. That's the one thing they will hang on to more tightly than anything else. The most wonderful thing about the gift of a child's respect is that even if we do trample on it, when we come to our children with a humble and repentant heart and ask for their forgiveness, the gift can often be reborn in them. It's never too late to seek the love of your kids. Don't let your life get in the way of your family. Especially when the kids are young, men feel compelled to immerse themselves in work in order to get ahead and be successful in life. Even later on, some of us are still driven towards success and accomplishments that are well beyond our needs. Sometimes the reason for being driven is one of two things. Either we are subconsciously trying to get the approval from our fathers that we never got as a boy, or we are angry at him and want to show him that he was wrong about us, that we are worthwhile. Don't let those unresolved issues drive a wedge between you and the kind of father you want to be for your kids. Time is the most valuable and the most limited resource we have to give our children. Your son needs your time more than he needs your money. That's a good challenge about the time, isn't it? Especially in such a time-starved world that we're in right now. It's one thing when my son asks me at the end of the day, hey, Dad, do you want to play a game or do you want to do Lego? I've been trying to say yes more than no, just so that we have that time. And I always put my phone down. I don't keep it with me unless him and I are actually looking up something. I always put it down and try to do that. It's my youngest. My eldest isn't home much, so we don't get to connect very often. And I don't know if you guys find this, but he often wants to connect at about like 1:30 in the morning, which my brain is starting to shut off at that hour. I'm not much use. So that can make it challenging. All right, pushing for performance. I have a tendency to too often judge my children's efforts by their performance. The reality is that an individual can do his personal best in an area in which he is not gifted and still fall short of average performance. Likewise, a person who is gifted in an area can do well while applying very little effort. Which scenario should be applauded more? I think it's more important for your son's heart to be in the right place, for him to do things for the right reason, than for him to be judged by the results of his efforts or performance. Sometimes I try to force my kids to behave a certain way by laying down the law instead of steering their behavior by changing the direction and focus of their hearts. As adults, our image of God is strongly influenced by the image we have of our earthly Father. There's a challenge for us. When we're overly critical or too strong as disciplinarians, we project to our children the image of a God who judges them on their performance. Instead, we should let our example teach them about His grace. By changing their hearts, we can make them want to change their behavior instead of forcing them to change through submission to our authority. As men, we often judge ourselves and others through comparison. We compare our achievements to see how we measure up. Unfortunately, we never measure performance against the best, although never with realistic expectations. We then wonder why we can't stack up against the professional athlete, the rich business magnate, or the man married to the supermodel, and we compare our sons against his best performing peers as well. It's not very fair to us, and it's certainly not fair to our sons to hold them up to such unattainable standards. You can have high expectations for your son and exhort him to do his best, but remember, however, that mistakes are opportunities to coach your son, not to criticize him. In my experience, everything will work out just fine after that. Mistake number 5, forgetting to have fun. It's so easy to get caught up in the complexities and stresses of everyday life. This is especially true for those who take responsibility seriously. But part of a dad's charm is his ability to have fun. Let yourself go and remember all the goofy things that make life worth living. Have fun with your son while he's still a boy. Take some time to just goof off. You'll have plenty of time to be serious and somber. One of the things kids appreciate most about their father is his sense of humor. When dad has life under control, he values the humorous side of life and shows it to his kids. Some of our dinner conversations lately have turned out to be quite humorous, joking around, especially with my sons. And yeah, I am often the butt of the joke, but it's fun. It's laughable. So even the way a man plays with his young child helps develop specific portions of a child's brain. With his roughhousing behavior, such as tossing his child in the air, a man signals that it is safe to take risks, provided, of course, he catches the child before he hits the ground. Men who play with their small children help develop fundamental portions of their children's brains, giving them greater confidence and the ability to take risks throughout life. The child, especially a boy, learns that risk-taking can be fun, rewarding, and sometimes dangerous. Good-natured wrestling with dad or other males also promotes physical development, emotional well-being, and self-esteem. Remember how much fun it was to go to the dump with your dad? Actually, those are some of my fun memories because we used to live in northern Alberta, and we would actually go to the dump to watch bears because the brown bears used to love the dump up there. I think black brown bears. The bears, they used to love going to the dump, and we'd actually drive up and do it. I remember, I think it was my dad's parents, one of the events we did with them when they came to visit us was to drive to the dump to watch the bears. And that's one of the memories that I have. It's kind of random, but yeah. How about to carnivals, rock quarries, construction sites, and shooting galleries? The fondest memories I have of my childhood are when my stepfather let his hair down and acted goofy. All of us kids laughed ourselves stupid whenever he told funny stories or danced a silly jig. Sometimes he'd allow my sisters to put curlers in his hair to create ridiculous hairdo. He once challenged me to a foot race around the block at 3 o'clock in the morning. When my kids were little, we played Ride 'em Horsey, with each child taking turns wearing out my knees riding me around the house. Our special game was Pin the Bear. Both kids ran full speed and leaped onto me, trying to wear me out and pin the bear to the ground. The battle would rage back and forth until little Kelsey, finally pinned by the bear and abandoned by her brother, would holler, "Help me! Help me!" as the bear growled and nuzzled her neck with his whiskers. Humor seems to compensate for a lot of foibles. Besides, a dad needs humor just to survive some of the potholes along the road to fatherhood. Mistake number 6, fearing failure. I spent much of my life avoiding anything I wasn't perfect at because I was afraid to fail. This has caused me to have a number of regrets. There are 2 kinds of pain. The pain of discipline. There are 2 kinds of pain. The pain of discipline weighs pounds, but the pain of regret weighs tons. The regrets I have in life are mostly those things I didn't do, not of the things I did. Oh, I regret some of the things I've done over the years. I've done many things I'm not proud of. But I don't regret my sins of commission like I do my sins of omission. Missing opportunities, having an apathetic attitude, and not searching for significance were all choices I made that I deeply regret. I was raised to believe that failure was the worst thing of all, but it's not. I've come to understand that true failure is never reaching out to attempt something great, to try to reach your full potential. You only fail when you don't try. This may sound strange, but I guess I regret never failing. Some people would feel proud of that, but never failing means you're never really doing anything. I believe in basketball coach John Wooden's philosophy that the team that makes the most mistakes will win the game. If my team is not making mistakes, it's because they are not trying very hard. They're not doing anything but standing around watching the action. They're not actively participating. The same can be said about life. I regret all the times I was impatient with my children and didn't give them the attention they deserved. I've told Frank many times that he needs to know that whatever mistakes I made as a dad, and I made many, those mistakes were my problem. They never had anything to do with him. He deserved more love and better fathering than I was capable of giving him. I also told him that if I were ever to hear him speak to his kids like I'd spoken to him in the past, I would break my heart, because I would know where those hurtful words came from. You have the power to hurt or help people's lives. Treat it with respect. It's almost like you have a superpower. It can be very destructive, so you must always use it for good. I think about Samson, who was marked by God for greatness, yet settled for just being a strong guy. See Judges 13-16. I think all men have been marked by God for greatness, yet the best of us settle for being strong or better than average. Coach Wooden said, "Do not permit what you cannot do to interfere with what you can do." Think about what God created for you. What gifts did He give you? Then look for opportunities to use those gifts for His glory. Don't be afraid to fail. I'm just going to grab a drink. Sorry, like I said, this is a long chapter. And we're almost halfway through. All right, abusing your power. Mistake number 7. Several years ago, during a rare bout of brutal self-honesty, I discovered that I treated my employees better than I treated my wife and children. I heard myself saying things to my family I would never say to my employees. If another man had made those kind of statements to my wife or kids, I would have physically confronted him. Why did I feel free to verbally wound those I treasure more than anything else in the world with words I would never dream of saying to a stranger? The greater your love for someone, the greater your capacity to experience a wide range of emotions towards him or her, including the harmful emotions of irritation, resentment, anger, and rage. Often these are transferred emotions. We're really mad at something or someone else, or even ourselves, but our family is a safe entity to dump our anger on. When we exhibit wrathful behavior, we lose our effectiveness as leaders in our homes. We have to remember our place as God's representatives in leading our families. John Emmerich Edward Dalbert said, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." As fathers, we pretty much have absolute power within our homes. We must take care not to become corrupt, allowing that power to bring out the worst in us. Your position never gives you the right to command. It only imposes on you the duty of living your life so that others can receive your orders without being humiliated. 2 verses from the Bible in particular remind us men to go easy on our sons. One is Ephesians 6, verse 4, which says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in training and instructions of the Lord." In other words, do not be unreasonable, severe, or ridicule your children. Colossians 3:21 says, "Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged." A father must be careful not to frustrate or discourage his children. Rules should be reasonable, not arbitrary. A father should train his children the same way God disciplines and teaches him. When I think of the things I've said to my boys when my tongue was like a double-edged sword, I realize I've been guilty at times of both discouraging and exasperating him. One area in which I had to learn self-discipline was controlling my anger. I think more and deeper damage is done by relationships by anger than any other factor. Women and children are both severely affected by a man's wrath. When we fail to control our tempers, we do not model noble leadership skills to our sons. Anger has a place, but it is rare. Commonplace, angry displays of temper are more often than not actually a substitute for lack of leadership skills on the part of an insecure leader. Hugh O'Neill summarized a man's repressed anger well. I am absolutely sure that a lot of daddy anger has more to do with unrealized dreams than his messy rooms. Trust me, you're not really angry at your kids. You're angry at somebody else, somebody who is a far less distinguished person than he dreamed of being. I think that sums up a lot of my anger as a young father. You'll talk more about anger control later in the book in a chapter on discipline. God has given us men great power that can be used for good or evil. Just look around at some of the problems men have created in other people's lives. Then, look at some of the great things men have accomplished to benefit others. It's an awesome power, but it comes with a need to understand it and use it responsibly. Former United Nations Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld said, "Only he deserves power who every day justifies it." A number of years ago, I realized I had gotten into the terrible habit of saying no every time one of my kids asked me for something. This was clearly an abuse of my power as a father. I often said no merely as a reflex reaction, even though later I realized I had no good reason for rejecting their request. Like I said, that's something I've been trying to work on with my kids when they ask me to do something. I explained to my son and daughter that if I did not have time to properly process their request before they expected an answer, I would be more likely to decline it. Now they know to give me some time to process their request before expecting an answer. It's a good idea just to explain that to your kids, because I feel like I'm rather slow in processing sometimes. Maybe if your kids understand that and you explain that to them, it might help, eh? Try that. Remember to be careful with what you promise. Many times we say things or make commitments that we cannot keep. These broken vows don't seem like a big deal to us, but they are huge to your son. Anything you say short of no is usually taken as a promise by your children. Be judicious about the promises you make. If you are not absolutely positive that you can keep them, do not make them. Your tongue has great power. Many things in life, such as firearms or prescription drugs, have the power to be used for good or to be abused. You wouldn't take something of great power like a nuclear warhead and abuse it, would you? No, you'd respect the potential it has for devastation, although many men I know might be tempted to take it apart to see how it works. The same goes with the power God has put in you. Learn all you can about that power and use it wisely. Then teach your son about the potential destructiveness with which men are endowed. Teach him to use power responsibly. Mistake number 8, neglecting your need for friendships. This is even one my wife's been challenging me on lately. Just the need to connect with other men and actually have those friendships. I think it's something I talked about in one of the previous episodes was listening to someone named Owen Benjamin. He really, in the people that he speaks to, he really encourages them something that he calls 10 and 10. And the whole point behind that is to have 10 men in 10 miles. So it'd be 10 and 16 kilometers. And to have those are men that you can call at any hour and that you can connect with and rely on. That's something I think I have 2. And even those relationships I've not been pursuing, those friendships. So I think that's a challenge that my wife's been putting on me and that I need to do something about. I haven't even read that section yet. Here we go. Neglecting your need for friendships. Mistake number 8. Most men in our country have many acquaintances, but no real friends. The pressure and time constraints of work and supporting a family takes away the opportunity to build masculine friendships. In order for your son to escape this trap, he needs male friendship modeled for him. Your boy needs your friendship as well as your guidance. To be the best father possible, you need other men in your life to hold you accountable and to lift you up during difficult times. Another man's experiences are invaluable when we try to navigate some of the uncharted waters of fatherhood. When I became a Christian at age 40, I was one of those men with no friends. Hence, I was lonely, miserably lonely. Shortly thereafter, I acted on faith to start praying every day for God to bring friends into my life. Now, 6 years later, I find myself abundantly blessed with dozens of good friends and rich, full masculine relationships. All right, so this guy wrote the book when he was 46, which is my age, close to my age. You know you're old when you can't remember how old you are. So I'm old. So 6 years later, I find myself abundantly blessed with dozens of good friends and rich, full masculine relationships. During his senior year in high school, Frank came home and told me about an incident that had happened in class. His current events teacher had remarked that men in our culture do not have friends anymore. They only have acquaintances. They do not have anyone they could call in the middle of the night for help. Frank said he thought to himself, "That's not true. My dad has many friends. I can think of at least a dozen men he could call in the middle of the night who would help him." He was right. That's when I realized that God had truly blessed me by answering my earlier prayers for friends. How do we men come to find ourselves with this isolationist mentality, and how do we go about changing it? Dr. Larry Crabb stated, "Men who as boys felt neglected by their dads often remain distant from their own children. The sins of the fathers are passed down onto children, often through the dynamic of self-protection. It hurts to be neglected, and it creates questions about our value to others. So to avoid feeling the sting of further rejection, we refuse to give the part of ourselves we fear might once again be received with indifference. When our approach to life revolves around discipline, commitment, and knowledge that runs from feeling the hurt of unmet longings that comes from a lack of deeper friendships, then our efforts to love will be marked more by required action than by liberation passion. We will be known as reliable, but not involved. Honest friends will report that they enjoy being with us, but have trouble feeling close. Even our best friends, including spouses, will feel guarded around us, a little tense and vaguely distant. It's not uncommon for Christian leaders to have no real friends." Does that sound familiar? We have to take risks in order to make, develop, and keep friendships. Maintaining a friendship is hard work. We have to reach out to other men whom we think we might be interested in befriending. Then we have to be vulnerable, opening ourselves up and allowing them to see our inner man. That's not very easy for most of us. In order to become an effective friend and leader, one must learn to be vulnerable with others and develop an ability to share feelings. It is a vital step to become a real person with whom others can connect emotionally. This is not easy to do if your parents did not teach you to share your emotional life with others. Emotional vulnerability is especially hard for men. That's so freaking true. One of the things I've discovered about making friends is that we have to be the ones to reach out and initiate friendship overtures. Often people reject these efforts, but instead of taking rejection personally, just understand that probably for a variety of reasons now might not be a good time. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt as often as possible. I suspect most people either are overwhelmed with life or just don't know how to accept and develop a friendship anymore. My philosophy is to treat them with respect and openness, and if they don't reciprocate, then that's their problem, not mine. If they do show an interest in becoming friends, then we have to care about them, not just ourselves. We have to reach out and make the effort to find out their needs and to try to help with them. Your son needs friends, and so do you. He needs to see how a man relates to other men in a healthy relationship. He also needs to see you being voluntarily accountable to other men. Isolation is death to a man's character. Perhaps that's why our culture, seemingly bent on the destruction of positive masculinity, continues to promote the rugged individualist as the model for men to look up to. The Marlboro Man, Dirty Harry, John Wayne, and James Bond are celluloid heroes, never needed any help from other men. They just sucked it up and overcame whatever problems popped up. Then they rode off into the sunset by themselves. But real men need other men. We need the accountability, comradeship, support, and yes, gasp, help that other men can provide. After all, if the devil can deceive a man, distract a man, separate him, and quarantine him from other men, the chances of isolation haunting his soul and creating masculine doubt are enhanced. Masculine doubt is when we question our God-given roles as leaders in our house and communities. And when masculine doubt is created, our leadership abilities are seriously eroded. Every guy knows or should know that certain things you just don't do alone. You don't go into the woods by yourself at night. You don't go swimming by yourself. You don't go hunting by yourself. You don't go mountain climbing or out in the ocean by yourself. And if you're smart, you don't go through life by yourself either. Even if you struggle to have good friendships instead of just acquaintances, make sure your son understands the importance of friends. Help him to see how you regret and have missed not having strong masculine friendships in your life. If you have good male friends, make sure to build them up to your son often. When you're gone, he will need other men in his life to hold him accountable and lift him up. That is one of the things I've been trying to encourage, especially my 21-year-old son with, is the importance of having those friends around him. He has a great group of friends around him now, and his mom and I are just so grateful for that. And we continue to pray for that, and we see it now. And just for me, moving internationally, I think really threw a spanner in that for me. I had good friends when we used to live in Townsville. I was there for so many years, and I didn't have kids. It's usually easier to make friends when you don't. And then when we moved back to Calgary for 3 years, reconnected with so many of the people I sort of grew up with, and those friendships are there. But then moving here to Adelaide, where I knew nobody except for my wife, has been a massive challenge, and something that I've been trying to encourage my son with, to live where you have friends, because it is so important. So here's just a little aside. What Scripture says about friendship. The Bible speaks many times about men needing friends and about the dangers of isolating ourselves. Here are just a few verses. Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friends. Proverbs 18:1. A man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment. Proverbs 24:6. In a multitude of counselors there is safety. And then Ecclesiastes 4:10-12. If one falls down, his friend can help him up, but pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Mistake number 9 is being inconsistent. Being consistent is one of the strongest traits a man can bring to fathering. Kids rely on you to be consistent with your responses no matter the circumstances. They rely on you to be dependable, a rock in the face of adversity. When life throws a curveball, they need dad to be there to tell them it's okay. Think about how scared you would be if the leader you were following, maybe someone you thought to be strong and invincible, were to suddenly become very frightened or to exhibit erratic, out-of-control behavior during a stressful situation. Would you want to follow that person again? I wouldn't. Your emotional stability, especially in stressful situations, provides your son with the security he needs in order to grow into a healthy man. You can't keep stressful situations from happening, but you can control how you react to them. Teach your son that a man keeps his head while others around him lose theirs. Bill was the kind of dad who was never consistent in his response to everyday situations. His kids never knew what to expect from him. One time he would react with humor, and the next time in the same situation presented itself, it would provoke rage in him. This causes children to be insecure, frightened, and lacking in self-confidence. Bill finally grasped the significance of being consistent during an incident with his son. One day, while Bill was fixing the lawnmower, the wrench slipped and he busted his knuckles against the engine mount. Yelling out in anger, he swore and flung the wrenches at the wall as hard as he could. Bobby, his 5-year-old son, was entering the garage just as Bill threw the wrench towards the wall with the door. Seeing the impending disaster, Bill tried to reach out and take back his actions. Bobby, no. The wrench crashed into the door jamb next to Bobby's head, splintering the wood. Bobby fell backwards with a look of horror on his face. As Bill rushed forward in relief, Bobby scrambled to his feet and raced to his mother in terror. It was weeks before Bobby would even look at Bill, much less talk to him. When he finally would talk about the incident, Bobby said, I thought you were just mad at me again. Sometimes you get mad and sometimes you laugh. I never know what I'm supposed to do. How come you don't like me, Daddy? Bill decided then and there to start controlling his emotions and become more consistent in his response to stressful situations. Mistake number 4, being complacent and passive. Take another drink. All right, mistake number 4, being complacent and passive. Several years ago, my life was going along just fine. I attended church every week, read the Bible, and prayed daily. If you had asked, I would have told you I was probably at least as devout as most Christians. I felt pretty good about where I was spiritually, and certainly my family was much better off than they had been several years previously before I became Christian. My business was rolling along as usual. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. In fact, I seemed to have finally attained some contentment in my life for a change. One day I was reading my Bible. Have you ever noticed that some verses just leap out at you when you least expect it? This time Proverbs 1:32 leapt out at me. And the complacency of fools will destroy them. I thought, that's rather odd. Complacency doesn't seem like a thing to be destroyed over. It's not like murder or adultery. But this passage stayed on my mind for several hours, and I was finally compelled to look up the word complacency in the dictionary. Here's how it is defined. Self-satisfaction accompanied by unawareness of actual dangers or deficiencies. When I put the verse and the definition together, I was thunderstruck. That was me. I was completely satisfied and totally unaware of any dangers in my life. Dangers that were closing in all around me, threatening to destroy everything I'd worked for. Suddenly, my heart started pounding, and I got that sick feeling in my stomach. I realized that in my complacency, my business had been incurring financial debt and projected losses, paying for them with credit lines over an extended period of time. In addition, a significant amount of employee lack of productivity that I had been ignoring suddenly became clear. My first thought was, my company is going out of business if I don't do something. I hadn't realized until that moment that my then 10-year-old company was literally teetering on bankruptcy. With some hard work and a good dose of humility and a lot of cost-cutting measures, I managed to save my business. But that passage didn't leave me. As I pondered it more and more, I asked myself, have I been complacent in my personal life and in the spiritual leadership of my family? And I had to admit that I was contributing nothing to better other people's lives to further the kingdom of the Lord. So I sought for God to show me how to stop being complacent in my life and in leading my family. I asked him, but how could one man make a difference in the world? There are so many problems, it's just overwhelming. Eventually, God confirmed to me that the one person can make a difference in this world, but he has to start by doing something. In order to break through the inertia of complacency, whether in our personal lives or as fathers, we must take action. And action requires courage and passion. So how do we find the bravery and fervor to take action? Jesus said, apart from me, you can do nothing. John 15:5. We must surrender ourselves to the Lord. Ask the Holy Spirit to fan the flames of passion in your soul and to give you the courage to carry out the actions he would have you do. For a significant period of time, I prayed consistently and passionately after the model of James 5:16, which says, the effective fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. I told the Lord that I was willing to follow him and that my life and family were his to do with as he would. Please just show me what you want me to do, I prayed. So I actually have something written on my wall that says, God, what do you want me to do today? That's something I try to remember every day, even though I sometimes do pretty poorly at it. So, please just show me what you want me to do, I prayed. In response, God led me to start the Better Dads Ministry, where I have the opportunity to impact the lives of men, women, and children. My wife and kids help out with the seminars and are much the better for the experience. And surprisingly, God led me to reevaluate my reason. Sorry about that. My book hit the Stream Deck. Let's see. We'll read that again because I think it probably cut off the audio. I prayed in response. God led me to start the Better Dad Ministry, where I have the opportunity to impact the lives of men, women, and children. My wife and kids help out with the seminars and are much the better for the experience. And surprisingly, God led me to reevaluate my reasons for coaching basketball, something I discovered I had a passion for. Now I do it to impact teenagers' lives by teaching them and being a mentor, not just for my own personal satisfaction. Now, how did this occur? Was it just coincidence? No, it occurred because I had finally understood the warnings about complacency in Proverbs. Complacency and passivity are man-killers in our culture. We need to consciously overcome these sappers of strength to be the men God has envisioned us to be. Listen to what God says in the book of Zephaniah. And it shall come to pass at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps and punish the men who are settled in complacency, who say in their hearts, "The Lord will not do good, nor will he do evil." Zephaniah 1, verse 12. Notice that God says he will punish the men, emphasis man, not women and not children, but the men. He holds us accountable as leaders in our homes and communities. The last 3 lines of the passage sum up many Christians' belief that God will not take action either for or against them because of their passivity. Many people are lulled into complacency by the belief that God is apathetic and we will face no accountability for our inaction. This is precisely why we don't hesitate to break our marriage vows. We don't fear the wrath of God anymore. In the movie Schindler's List, Liam Neeson stars as Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist during World War II. Never one to miss a chance to make money, Schindler marches into Poland on the heels of the SS after the Nazi invasion. He dove headfirst into the black market of the underworld, and soon made friends with the local Gestapo bigwigs, softening them up with women, money, and illicit booze. His newfound connections helped him acquire a factory that he ran with the cheapest labor around, Jewish labor. At first, Schindler seemed to like every other usurping German industrialist, driven by profit and unmoved by the means of his profiteering. But somewhere along the line, something changed. He succeeded in his quest for riches, but by the end of the war, he had spent everything he made on keeping 1,300 Jewish men and women alive. He had literally bought their lives. Sorry. Throat's drying out. It's a long chapter. In a powerful scene at the end of the movie with Allied forces on the way, Schindler said goodbye to the many Jewish factory workers he had saved. As they gave him a gold ring in gratitude, Schindler broke down and began sobbing in remorse. He regretted that he had not done more to save additional lives. Even when his workers tried to assure him that he had done so much more than anyone else, he cried out in agony over his regret at his complacency. Schindler, while certainly not as complacent as most others, realized too late that he could have done so much more. He regretted it dearly, and while others did not blame him, he knew in his heart that he could have done more. I picture many of us, myself included, at the time of our judgment, having the same repentant and sorrowful attitude before God that Schindler displayed at that powerful scene. It will be a time of grave recognition of missed opportunities and lost rewards. Christians who are mired in complacency tend to think God is complacent as well, but God is never complacent. He is always active and passionate about his people, and he expects us to be as well. Some falsely believe that God will not correct their sin, so they are complacent about their own repentance. How can we not expect God to correct us? God will not be complacent. He will take some kind of action, even if that action is being quiet while we learn patience or withhold financial blessings until we learn good stewardship. So how do we take the first step out of complacency? Begin by praying to God and listening to his response. Pray to God for passion. Passion is the inner force that lifts a man out of his mainstream of mediocrity and into the lonely pursuit of his dreams. Ephesians 4:22-24 talks about spiritual growth coming from taking off the old, renewing the mind, and putting on the new. Here the Apostle Paul compares the Christian life to stripping off the dirty clothes of a sinful past and putting on the snowy white robes of Christ's righteousness. In other words, once we understand the folly of complacency and God's judgment of it, we change our attitudes and willingly want to move beyond our belief into action. When we have put on the new, surrendered ourselves, God makes us able to hear the cries of the poor in spirit and empowers us to help them, maybe even our own children. He allows us to hear what we would have us do in his name and then to reach out and help others. Teach your son the dangers of allowing complacency to creep into his life, both the spiritual dangers and the dangers to his manhood. I suspect, too, much time watching television and playing video games starts a boy down the path of complacency. Men mired in complacency and passivity are not noble leaders. They are, however, men with many regrets in life. Questions for reflection and discussion. So we are done the sections. We'll just go through the questions. And again, I will actually write these questions on the Better Dad Show podcast, the betterdadadshow.com, where you can read those and you can even leave comments on there. Just anything that you have to say about the episode, maybe something that spoke directly to you, or about the questions, which we'll write on the site. So questions for reflection and discussion. What do you consider the 3 biggest mistakes you made as a father? What did you learn from them? 2. Develop a list of strengths and weaknesses your son possesses. How can you help nurture his strengths so he succeeds in life? 3. Chart the actual amount of time you spend each day with your son over a week's time. How does this amount of time differ from what you thought it would be? 4. In what ways would you like to overcome complacency of your life, both as a man and a father? What types of failures do you fear? And how can you overcome the fear by taking the risk of failure? That is the end of chapter 5. Now, given how sore my throat is, I'm wondering if next week we might break it up into 2 because it's an even longer chapter. Or I might just find something better to drink than tea with no milk, because I'm wondering if that might be driving me out. So those are the questions. So hopefully we can think about them this week. And if you guys have any comments, let me know. We can go from there. So this is a value for value podcast, meaning that if you find value in it, feel free to give value back. So you can share the episodes. You can submit content over at betterdadshow.com, or you can also donate over there to the running of the podcast, hosting costs, internet costs, stuff like that. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was just looking at how can we equip our sons. So this kind of ties in not also to the other one about spending time with our kids. What do we do together? So if we look at what we do together with our kids, we can consider, what skills can we teach them? Because one of the best ways I've found in spending time with people, with other guys, is to what can we be doing together? And learning skills, I think, is a great one. So again, have a right. There's no one watching live at the moment, so I am talking to myself, so I don't expect an answer. But afterwards, head over to betterdadshow.com and let me know, what skills do you think our kids could have? Right off the top of my head, I could think building a computer. That's something I do, so it's something I can teach how to do, and it's something I've taught all 3 of my kids how to do. I think it's important. Also, maybe servicing a vehicle. I have a friend who I might be able to talk into teaching my kids how to do a basic service on their own vehicle. What else? What do you think? What should we equip our sons? What physical skills can we equip our sons with what to do so that they have that skill moving forward? So think about that. Again, betterdadshow.com. You can look at answering those 4 questions, and also let me know, what skills do you think your son should have, and should we equip him with just in moving forward? So we'll say goodbye now. Thank you for watching or listening, and I really look forward to hearing your feedback about what you think about this chapter. Bye. You think, what should we equip our sons? What physical skills can we equip our sons with what to do so that they have that skill moving forward? So think about that. Again, betterdadshow.com. You can look at answering those 4 questions, and also let me know, what skills do you think your son should have, and should we equip him with just in moving forward? So we'll say goodbye now. Thank you for watching or listening, and I really look forward to hearing your feedback about what you think about this chapter.